Everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf with you. Boy, we're running a little late today, so I do apologize for everybody watching in the live stream. For those of you who are patrons and you're just watching this whenever, you're not going to notice anything. But anyway, welcome. Boy, do we got a heavy Monday show for you guys today. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the shooting in Las Vegas. I almost didn't want to talk about it for reasons that I'm going to tell you during the story. But again, that's super disastrous news that we have. So we will talk about that. We also will talk about the Trump administration, a memo coming from them trying to blame someone else for their reaction to Hurricane Maria. That's a disaster. Then we've got Trump cabinet freaking out over the removal of Tom Price that happened on Friday, which we did not get a chance to report on. It was shortly after the show had aired, is when Tom Price, of course, resigned. We'll talk about that as well in this story. Then we've got price gouging. Then children's health care. Republicans holding up children's health care. That's awesome. And then we'll talk about tax cuts. So a lot of stuff today. We've got a full show, a lot of stories, a lot of TYT Nation. So let's get to it. Before, real quick here, you can always help out the show through our Patreon, patreon.com/TYT Nation. And thanks to those of you who do help us out by making a donation, patreon.com/TYT Nation. And you can also help us out by using the YouTube Super Chat, which elevates your comments and actually also goes to help the show. So, and finally, you can get a hold of the show on our Twitter, on Twitter at TYT Nation. So we're using the hashtag TYT Nation. All right. So there's that, all that stuff. Make sure to like and share the stream, of course, so you can get it out. And we will have, like I said, we've got all these stories. We're going to get through them all. So we're definitely going to run over 4 o'clock, which is fine. Because, like I said, we got all this stuff to do. So let's get to it. And let's start out with the disaster story of the day. There was another mass shooting in America. This time happened last night in Las Vegas. Now, this was during a country music festival. I'm not a huge fan of country music, but that doesn't mean that the people who are deserve to be shot at, which unfortunately that's what happened. The shooter, of course, has already been identified. I'm going to say his name once, and then I'm not going to say it anymore. I really don't want to give this guy any credit. Just to make sure that people don't try to do copycats. And that's why we normally try not to say his name in order to, not have people follow in his footsteps. Because, again, that would be a complete disaster. But this man is identified as Stephen Paddock. Now, he's a retired man in his 60s. And he decided for some reason or other, we can't exactly ask him because he did not survive, but decided to open fire on a crowd from a 32nd story window. Now, he fired into a crowd of 22,000 concert goers. Now, the results of that, insofar as 58 people were unfortunately killed, over 500 injured. Those numbers are preliminary. They're expected to possibly go up. I hope not. But as we can tell right now, it's an incredible tragedy. And right now is now the deadliest shooting in modern American history. But unfortunately, again, and this is my cynicism showing through, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that it will stay the deadliest shooting in American history for all that long, knowing how bad it's gotten in this country. Now, I want to show you Donald Trump, President Trump's response to the shooting in a clip here. Let's take a look at that.
We are joined together today in sadness, shock, and grief. Last night, a gunman opened fire on a large crowd at a country music concert in Las Vegas, Nevada. He brutally murdered more than 50 people and wounded hundreds more. It was an act of pure evil. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are working closely with local authorities to assist with the investigation, and they will provide updates as to the investigation and how it develops. I want to thank the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and all of the first responders for their courageous efforts and for helping to save the lives of so many. The speed with which they acted is miraculous and prevented further loss of life. To have found the shooter so quickly after the first shots were fired is something for which we will always be thankful and grateful. It shows what true professionalism is all about. Hundreds of our fellow citizens are now mourning the sudden loss of a loved one, a parent, a child, a brother or sister. We cannot fathom their pain. We cannot imagine their loss. To the families of the victims, we are praying for you, and we are here for you. And we ask God to help see you through this very dark period.
All right, so that's some of his statement. He goes on, he wants to give some Bible verses, and that's fine. That's actually a perfectly fine statement. Obviously reading from a teleprompter, somebody else wrote that, but you know what, that's great. That statement was fine, whoever wrote it, great job. Okay, and good job for Trump for not going off the script and actually just reading it. Wonderful, you should do that more often. Now, so that's all I got to say about Trump. Again, great statement. Stick to that. Please don't say any more. Perfect. It's perfect. All right. Now, as for the shooter, again, I'm not going to say his name anymore, but there are some more details coming out about him. Now, I will refer to him not as a shooter, but as a terrorist, because I believe that's what he is. And yes, I'm calling him a terrorist, and I also will point out that a lot of the people in mainstream corporate media are not calling him a terrorist, and I think that's very, very interesting, actually. Now, maybe it could be the fact that he's white. White people apparently can't be terrorists when it comes to mainstream corporate media. Maybe some sort of unspoken rule, I don't know. But every article I've read, oh, lone wolf, oh, we don't know the motive yet, not a terrorist, not part of any international terror group. That's the only time it comes up. Apparently, you have to find a motive first before you can even dare to call a white person a terrorist. But hey, man, if you're a Muslim or black person, then immediately it's terrorism, and immediately it's, you don't need to find a motive. It's just terrorism, straight up. So I always find that incredulous when the news does that. Very, very frustrating. But anyway, there are details about his personal life, and for the most part, it's actually very mundane. This guy has no history of violence. There's nothing. The one interesting thing that people have found out about him is that his father was apparently on the FBI's most wanted list for a string of armed robberies. I didn't know that. Now, of course, I don't know what kind of impact it had on this guy. For most of his life, for 60 years, he did nothing. And then, I don't know, maybe he snapped. I'm not sure what happened. But again, we don't know. We don't know. There's no motivation on that for this terrorist action. So, and look, I don't know if I necessarily care what kind of motive he has, because nothing should be able to explain why you went up into a tall building and just indiscriminately fired into a crowd. Now, as for the weapons that he used, well, from some of the video from the scene, it seems possible that he had possession of perhaps an automatic weapon, or had taken certain weapons and modified them to be to function as an automatic weapon. So apparently there are different mods that you're able to get for those guns to turn them into from semi-automatic into an automatic type of weapon. So, in fact, police had found 10 different weapons in his hotel room, some of which, as I mentioned, could have been altered, may have been altered to function as an automatic weapon. So, and the other thing is, I don't think he snapped. It seems like he did plan this. So there seems like a bit of premeditation. Now, as far as the international terrorism angle goes, ISIS, strangely enough, took credit for this, but again, ISIS takes credit for everything. So I wouldn't exactly take them at their word. Now, that's all the stuff that we know right now. Obviously, there's going to be more stuff coming out. For example, they're going to be going through his social media. They're going to be talking to people. I believe they already talked to his ex-wife, his brother, and there will be more information that's going to come out. But what we know right now is this was a retired guy who just liked to go to the casino and to concerts, and showed no outward reason for doing what he did. So again, we don't know. And again, I'm not sure I necessarily care, but I'm just trying to give you all the information that I know so far. Now, on this, I didn't really want to cover this story, and reading through it, I mean, yes, it's important for people to know what happened, and for, of course, the victims to be, honored, because these people were, they were doing nothing. They're innocent people, and their lives are forever changed or destroyed. So, and of course, it's important to talk about the victims, but as far as the shooter and this terrorist and why he did what he did, and for me, it's like, I ask myself, what's the fucking point, right? Look, yes, this is another mass shooting, and it's an absolute tragedy, and it's an absolute disaster, but unfortunately, I don't think covering it is going to lead to anything happening. Now, don't get me wrong, I do want things to change, right? I just have no faith in the system for it to change. I mean, look, it didn't happen after Sandy Hook when it should have. It didn't happen after the Pulse shooting. It didn't happen after any other mass shootings that we've had. So why would anything change now? We've unfortunately shown that our society is one that's going to only set or send thoughts and prayers and then move on and not do anything until the next mass shooting. And then the same thing. And that frustrates the hell out of me. And it frustrates me that we don't do anything because of how broken our political system is and our climate is in America. All we're going to do is we're going to start hearing talking points. I mean, it's already started. What is it? Gateway Pundit put out a story. Oh my God, he's a Democrat. He's loves Rachel Maddow. See, it's the left. They're all violent. And that was based on false information that was coming out as well. Fake news, call it what you will, but it's already started, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating. And then, of course, there's already shouting online, the different forums, Facebook, Twitter, everybody's after each other, and then that'll die down, and then we move on to the next one. So, I mean, for me, like personally, when it comes to mass shootings, again, I don't like to talk about them because I think Sandy Hook was the point of no return. If we as a country don't do anything after a room full of children end up getting slaughtered, then we're not going to do anything. I mean, shouldn't have that been the lowest point? The point of where the nation should wake up and say, oh, you know what? Oh my God, maybe we should do something about guns. But we're not. And at least not politically. Again, we've got a lot of politicians that are bought by the gun manufacturers. And right now, I think we as a nation treat money as more important than human lives. And we're so politically divided. I mean, people no longer pay attention to the facts if it doesn't fit their side's predefined narrative. So it really seems really hopeless, in my opinion, for any type of change to happen. And now it's really, really difficult for someone like me to not be discouraged. And here I am. I'm super discouraged, and I'm openly admitting it to you guys. And on this issue, I don't know if we're ever, maybe not ever is a strong word, but if we're going to change, at least in the immediate future. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop trying, that we shouldn't stop fighting for change. And that's the other thing. You can be incredibly discouraged and very, very cynical, as I am, and still fight for change. And that's, of course, because the fight for change, the fight to try to save people's lives, is a fight worth being part of. But again, cynicism, like, that's my mood today. That's how I feel. And every time I see one of these mass shooting stories and I talk about this is where I end up. That I don't feel like we're able to make any sort of positive change with the way our political system and our environment is right now. And I think that's the biggest tragedy of all, because if we don't do anything, we're just going to keep seeing stuff like this happen over and over and over again, and it absolutely breaks my heart. So, look, my thoughts are with the families. I don't believe in prayers, but I want it to be more than just my thoughts go into these families. I actually want to do something to prevent this from happening to someone else. I can't go back and change it. We can't go back and change what happened to the people at Sandy Hook or Pulse or any of the other mass shootings or this one. But by God, we can actually do something for the future. And we need to put all the pressure that we can on the politicians to stop taking that money from the gun manufacturers and actually fucking do something that the majority of the American people actually want us to do. And skip the echo chambers and skip the talking points and all the bullshit and just actually fucking do something. Because I'm tired of these stories. I'm tired of mass shootings. I'm tired of the media making this into a 24/7 fucking spectacle in order to get nothing but ratings. I'm sick of all of it. And I'm sure you guys are too. So we got to do something. Things got to change. And we got to keep fighting for that change, or else nothing is going to happen, and it's going to keep getting worse and worse. Jesus Christ, man. I just absolutely hate these stories. Absolutely hate these fucking stories. All right. All right, let's move on here, okay? I'm sorry to go off on that rant on these guys, on you guys, this issue. It's frustrating. All right. Let's go to something else. There we go. Well, let's jump from one disaster to the next. While we're all in such a good fucking mood, right? Now, while let me say that right. While Puerto Rico is still attempting to recover from the destruction caused by Hurricane Maria, which, by the way, knocked out power entirely for the whole of the island, and left many of its citizens, of course, without food, water, and other necessities. The White House has actually been looking for someone to blame for their historically slow response. Now, that, of course, seems rather unclassy. I mean, who cares who's to blame here? Just get out there, do something, right? Who cares? Like, stop devoting your resources into blaming someone else for your shortcomings and just fucking do something, okay? Do something. However, unclassy seems to be a really, really good description of the people currently occupying the White House. And that's evidenced by a memo recently leaked and published by Axios.com. So, hey, now we've got a leaked memo. Now, according to this memo, the Trump administration is aggressively trying to shift the blame for its poor response to Hurricane Maria and to carry out what they call planned hits against critics of the president. I mean, can you believe this? Of course you can, because this is the Trump administration that we're talking about. Now, the person who authored this memo is a man named Tom, Boster? Now, this guy is Trump's top Homeland Security advisor. Now, in this memo, which detailed the administration's plans to start a theme of recovery, planning for the bright future that lies ahead for Puerto Rico, Planned hits, tweets, TV bookings, and other work will limit the need for reactionary efforts. So basically, he's like, you know what we're going to do? They're going to criticize us. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to go do some planned hits. Instead of focusing our resources on doing something for the island, we're going to go after people like the mayor that criticized us for our slow response. In fact, what they're doing is basically setting up this political narrative, right? Now, the narrative being, we didn't fuck it up. It was their fault. Now, I don't think anybody here should be shocked at that. I do actually think that a lot of administrations consider the politics of their response to certain things. So, but still, the Trump administration, what they're doing seems really unprecedented. I do think it's worse. I mean, for example, look at the response, the difference in the response between Texas and Florida. Now, both of them were ravaged by hurricanes, right? Now, to be fair, the devastation wasn't quite as bad in Florida and Texas as compared to Puerto Rico. Now, that doesn't mean I'm trying to minimize the disasters there, because, again, they were terrible, and we needed to do, to get in there and to do something about it and to make sure that these people had access to food, water, and that were taken to safety and all that stuff, right? But compared to Puerto Rico, the whole island pretty much has no power. And over half of the 3.4 million inhabitants have no access to clean water. They're having to scrounge for food. It's a disaster. It's a humanitarian disaster. And to make it worse, these people are American citizens. Now, that makes it worse for the Trump administration because of the optics of the whole thing. I don't think it's actually worse because a humanitarian disaster is a humanitarian disaster, and we should help regardless of whether or not they're American citizens. But if you're somebody who's like Donald Trump who ran on, America first, America first. Well, there are Americans on Puerto Rico. They're all Americans, and they need your fucking help like yesterday. Yes, they are just as American as Texans and Floridians. Yet, apparently, the administration sucks balls at helping them. For example, it took about a week for relief efforts to just begin in earnest. Now, but of course, you're going to see it's not their fault. No, it's never their fault. The White House says, and this is Bossler, the storm caused these problems, not our response to it. We have pushed about as much stuff and people through a tiny hole in as short as a time frame as possible. Now, earlier, after the mayor of San Juan had actually criticized Trump, he's like, well, it's not our fault. It's big ocean. It's a tiny little island and a very, very big ocean, right? You realize there are reports of enormous shipping containers just full of relief supplies that were sitting in the docks of San Juan. We could actually get the stuff there without a problem. Now, once it's there, it's very difficult to distribute it. Or we seem to be having a problem distributing this food, medicine, water, and other supplies, right? Gasoline. Now, some administration officials say, well, we can't distribute it because the roads aren't clear. Well, that's actually being disputed by some of the local mayors who are like, no, we've traveled the roads. They're actually quite clear. But there are other issues. For example, there's not enough truck drivers, and that's a legitimate problem. There's not enough diesel fuel, and there are stores without electricity, and you can't exactly store things that require a cold environment in a store without power. So I get those things, right? However, I do think the administration can do more, can direct more resources, right? Now, instead of doing that, what they're doing is, again, focusing on the president's critics. In fact, Fox News on Sunday decided to go after San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz. They called her, quote, a far-left radical. That's hilarious. And they even sent Geraldo Rivera and his camera crew out there to interview her and then run a smear job on her. Geraldo was like, oh, no, she's very, very partisan, and I think she has a loathing for Donald Trump. And, quote, this is the best part. This is the best quote here. He said, I think she needs an open heart and some gratitude. Gratitude. Bitch, you talking about gratitude? She's an American citizen. You realize her job with the federal government is to take care of its citizens. Gratitude is not part of the equation here. Okay. Now, what you want her to grovel? Is that to Donald Trump? Oh, thank you, Donald Trump. Thank you for sending aid and supplies to Puerto Rico. Thank you so much. No, fuck that. She's not going to do that. Besides, all she was doing when she was criticizing Donald Trump is saying, look, man, we got people that are having a serious problem here. Okay. People are dying. We need to get the stuff out here sooner, and you guys have been slow, and the government has been incompetent. Wait a minute. I thought that was what the conservatives have been arguing all along. Oh, government's incompetent, can't do anything right. Well, under Trump, when it's true, they're like, no. What are you talking about? Government is fantastic. We're doing a fantastic job. No, what she said is, the aid isn't getting here as quick as it should be getting here, and there are people in all municipalities literally starving, dehydrating. She also said that there was no electricity in most of the island and frequent brownouts in the hospitals. Meanwhile, the FEMA asked people to register for help on the phone or internet. Well, you can't do that. Do they realize that when you don't have power, you also don't have the internet or landline phones? And maybe if you're lucky enough to have a cell phone, but do you have reception? I don't know. I've never been through a hurricane. I mean, you could tear down those cell towers without a problem. And that's always funny, right? If you need help, you need to go, register on the phone or the internet after a disaster. What are the things you usually lose during a disaster? You lose the phone and the internet. Anyway. But look, that's all she was doing. She was just asking for aid. And you had these chuckleheads on Fox, like Geraldo Rivera, saying, oh, leftist, you need to be grateful for what you got. That's not all. Other administration officials have sought to smear Cruz by saying she has been uncooperative with FEMA and had not attended its strategy sessions, but Cruz's office shot back by saying that it had sent representatives to all meetings and has been very cooperative with the relief effort. But you know why she wasn't there? Because she was actually out there trying to help her own people, her own citizens. I mean, there are pictures out there where she's wading in very high chest-deep water trying to help out. And what's Trump doing? Well, he was out there golfing. Oh, but don't worry. He offered his golf trophy to the survivors of Puerto Rico. So, of Maria. For fuck's sakes, man. Look, this administration is so incredibly triggered. It is filled with so many goddamn special snowflakes. You could fill a snow globe with all the snowflakes. It's crazy. But what's even more gross than the smears is, and I mentioned this before, the back padding that's being done. The administration is sitting around telling themselves how much of a great job that they're doing, while the situation isn't actually getting better, and actually won't be getting better for several years, for many years. For example, their infrastructure is completely destroyed. And not only that, but they can't really afford to fix their infrastructure. They're $70 billion in debt. And now they're struggling to deliver food and medicine and water. So, and yet, of course, the people in the administration, they're just going to sit there and they're going to pat themselves in the back while, going after the victims here, people who were impacted by the storm, that were rightly pointing out the slow response and the slow relief effort, which apparently gets in the way of the congratulatory blowjobs they're giving themselves. It's incredibly grotesque, and actually maybe one of the worst humanitarian responses to an American territory in American history. It's a disaster. Man. I know, we go from one shit story to another. Terrible. All right, moving on. Some shitty administration officials to other shitty administration officials. Now, last Friday saw the departure of Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price. And he had apparently spent a large amount of taxpayer money on private airfare, charter flights. Now, that right there is the swamp. And in a rare moment of praise for Trump, I actually will point out that he was incredibly pissed. that Price had done this, and that when he was found out, that he only offered to pay some of the money back. So, in fact, according to the New York Times, Trump told reporters that he was not happy. Quote, "I can tell you I'm not happy. Mr. Price is a very, very good man, but the secretary's offer to pay back the government for just part of the costs of the private flights would be unacceptable. He's got to pay them all back. He's got to pay them all back." All right. So again, a little bit of rare credit for Trump for getting pissed off and actually saying, you know what, this is unacceptable. You got to go. You made me look bad. And I realize that that's what it's about. Of course, it's all about the optics here. But at the same time, Tom Price is the guy that literally wanted to get rid of Medicare. So, you know what? I'm not crying for his loss. But anyway, now following that departure, other cabinet members who have also spent taxpayer money on airfare are starting to freak the fuck out. According to the Daily Beast, Trump cabinet members are in a mad dash to avoid the fate of ousted Secretary Tom Price, fearful that their own private travel could hasten their departure from the Trump administration. At various agencies, officials are attempting to put a positive spin on their boss's use of charter jets. In some cases, they're implicating officials within their own departments as a way to shield themselves from the president's wrath. Now, this is already an awesome story, and everything that we expect inside of the Trump administration. It's like, oh, look, you've got these departments that are, department heads that are spending money on all this extravagant travel. And then they're saying, oh, it's not me. I didn't plan this. No, it was that guy. Oh, what's that? Oh, that is the sound of the bus and somebody getting thrown under it. So, but look, this was happening before Tom Price stepped down. But it was actually, it's now getting thrown into overdrive. Once it became clear that Price was on the outs, there was an immediate realization that, quote, if we ever got tied to Price, and this is according to a senior official at another federal agency, if we ever got tied to Price, we'd be crushed. Yes. Now, what other agencies? Well, there's the EPA, where Administrator Scott Pruitt has made some questionable purchases. Now, for one, he had taken out and chartered military flights for official business at a cost of $60,000. Now, they got a little bit worried, the EPA did, so the press office began putting out a series of emails highlighting the significantly lower price tag of Pruitt's taxpayer-funded flights and the different nature of his official travel. They also emphasized that Pruitt had chartered a plane only after commercial flight delays would have prevented him from attending an official event. See, mine was cheaper, man. Mine was cheaper, and I had to. I didn't have to take that expensive charter flight. I mean, I had to because I didn't have a choice. See, so you can't blame me. Please don't fire me, Trump. Please don't fire me. That's what this is. But wait, it actually gets a lot better. Now, the EPA also quickly sought to shift focus away from Pruitt and started pointing to the lawyers that work beneath him. An agency official provided the Daily Beast with letters from its general counsel's office approving Pruitt's use of chartered and military aircraft ahead of time to show that he was not independently opting for such travel options. See, hey, look at that. It wasn't Scott Pruitt. No. It was those damn lawyers. Those lawyers were doing it. I mean, they were chartering these fancy jets. And Tom Price, he was totally going to say something. And Scott Pruitt was totally going to say something, right? But he didn't want to go against the lawyers. He was too busy doing the people's business. Nobody believes that. And besides, it's not just the flights. Pruitt has also been dogged by revelations over the size of his security detail. So way too much security. And we know previously that Pruitt is not somebody that allows other people to make eye contact with him. He's like, no, leave me alone. I'm not interested in talking to you. I'm not interested in doing anything that has to, or with anything that has to do with you. Leave me alone. I'm not here for you. I'm not here to protect the environment. I'm here to talk to oil company executives and help the giant corporations. After all, Pruitt was a guy who used to sue the EPA for actually doing the job of the EPA, trying to protect the environment. Now, it's different that if the EPA fails to protect the environment, yeah, then you could sue. And you can go after them and you could say, hey, why didn't you protect the environment like you said you were going to? That's legitimate. Pruitt was not doing that. Pruitt was like, no, you're doing too good a job protecting the environment and putting too many regulations on my corporate friends. I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. So yeah, let's cut that out. Okay, cut it out. Now, the other thing that he got in trouble for was, other than the security detail, are reports that the agency spent $25,000 on a soundproof booth at EPA headquarters. A $25,000 phone booth. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Who needs a soundproof phone booth anyway? Apparently Scott Pruitt says he does. Oh, it's because I make calls to the president. That's right. A source with knowledge of the situation told the Daily Beast that prior to the installation of the EPA phone booth, Pruitt did not have a secure phone line with which to speak to the president. Well, that's funny because the last EPA head didn't actually need a secure phone line. Why do you? That's very interesting. So, again, what makes Pruitt so special that he needs a special phone line? Maybe it's the investigation. Could be. I don't know what Scott Pruitt has to do with the investigation. Maybe he's worried he's going to be wiretapped. I don't know. Or maybe Pruitt's up to some other shady shit that he talks to the president about. I don't know. Now, furthermore, on the phone booth, the vendor building device said it was a custom installation that cost way more than the standard model, but EPA staff quickly argued that it showed the importance of Pruitt's role in the administration and how close the president is. In fact, their statement says Lisa Jackson's EPA was always on the defensive, even with the White House, which explains why they didn't need a secure line with the president. This is EPA spokesman John Wilcox said in a statement. He said, unlike the previous administration, President Trump and Administrator Pruitt are working closely to protect the environment. Protect the environment, my ass. This guy's, he's not protecting the environment. He's wasting our money, taxpayer money, on private jets, private airfare to meet with the heads of oil companies. That's not protecting the environment. He does the bidding of the oil companies. Now, interestingly enough, Pruitt faces an investigation into his use of private jets. In fact, the Daily Beast writes that the request of congressional Democrats last week, EPA's Inspector General opened an investigation into the adequacy of and adherence to policies and procedures regarding travel by an EPA administrator. So, here comes trouble, man. What did I tell you? The guy who promised to drain the swamp, Donald Trump, ended up putting the swamp in the White House. But why is anybody surprised when these people are found doing swampy things? They are swamp monsters. But there's more. Other agencies could soon find themselves in a similar position. And unlike the EPA, they're pointing the finger at the White House itself and not their own lawyers. One official at one agency currently under scrutiny for private travel noted that White House Deputy Chief of Staff Joe Hagan had met with agency heads early in the Trump administration to discuss what types of travel would be appropriate. Hagan, the official noted, continues to sign off on military travel by federal agencies. Other Trump cabinet members have tried to publicly downplay and defend their travel habits. For example, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, in remarks at the Heritage Foundation, said reports about the more than $12,000 in taxpayer funds he had spent on chartered flights were, quote, a little BS. Just a little bit of BS? Well, it turns out just a little bit of BS is still fucking BS. Just saying, dude. Then, of course, you've got VA Administrator David Shokin, who had attempted to spin his disclosure of his own controversial private flights as a win for government transparency. That is awesome. He says, it took response to criticism over a 10-day European trip Shokin and his wife took, during which the VA had paid for flights, a day at the Wimbledon tennis tournament, and the Thames, I'm saying that wrong, the Thames River cruise, followed by an evening at Piccadilly Circus. Shokin stressed that he conducted official business and announced that the VA would now be disclosing additional information about official travel practices. hey, look, man, I was doing some shady stuff, but good thing we've got government transparency to catch me doing that shady shit. I'm serious. This is a press release. Under this administration, VA is committed to becoming the most transparent organization in government, and I'm pleased to take another step in that direction with this move. Veterans and taxpayers have a right to know about my official travel as secretary, and posting this information online for all to see will do just that. Weak fucking sauce. You got caught, son. You got caught, and now you're like, government transparency. God, I love government transparency. You get no credit, sir. Actually, to be honest, you're kind of rubbing it in our face that all your trips had actually benefited you at our expense. And look, yes, you're wasting our money, and you're admitting it. But here's someone who isn't. Steve Mnuchin. Now, Mnuchin, there's, I guess, some investigation into whether or not he might have taken his wife out for their honeymoon on taxpayer money. That, of course, the travel would have been paid for and not the actual honeymoon. But still, I don't want to pay for your fucking travel. That's bullshit. Now, the Treasury acknowledged that a request had been lodged for such travel, but the agency withdrew its request after a secure communications option was identified during the Secretary's extended travel. The Treasury's Inspector General opened an investigation into department-wide travel practices in the wake of the controversy, but Mnuchin insists that he did nothing wrong. Quote, I've never asked the government to pay for my personal travel. I'm very sensitive to the use of government funds. I'm sure you are, dude. I'm super sure you are. Look, this is what happens when you put the swamp in the White House. And look, and it's not like Trump's not smart enough to find this out. No, he knows. He's in there too. He is part of the swamp. The only reason that he was mad is because, oh shit, dude, you're making me look bad. Like, you're going to shine attention onto my own grift. Like, stop. That's over the top. And look, people use taxpayer money, turns out, to enrich themselves. I know, a big shocker, right? That's actually why you need rules and watchdogs to make sure that people follow those rules. If not, you're going to end up getting this massive corruption in the government just like this. But please, Republicans, continue to deregulate government and get rid of all the watchdogs. I'm sure that'll work out just fine. Did I say we have a long show? We've got a long fucking show. So let's keep going. All right. Now, you guys remember when President Trump went after Martin Shkreli. Now, Shkreli, of course, rose to national infamy after his company hiked up the price of a potential life-saving drug from $7 a pill to about $750 a pill. That's an amazing, not amazing in a good way, but an amazing level of price hike. Okay, I said that completely wrong, but you guys get what I'm saying. Now, after this happened, everybody was fucking outraged. Okay, for example, Bernie Sanders said that this was, or he had called the pharmaceutical industry out itself for its greed, right? And of course, even Donald Trump weighed in on this and promised to crack down on companies that do this to regular people, that price gouge, right? Now, how did that promise go? It turns out 8 months into his administration, a rule that was supposed to prevent price gouging is being delayed over and over and over again. In fact, the administration had just delayed it once again. According to The Hill, the Trump administration last week decided to delay the implementation of a rule under the ACA meant to punish drug companies for engaging in price gouging. Now, this is, of course, the HHS, right? It's reported that on Thursday had logged the delay quietly of the rollout of the rule into the Federal Register. Now, the rule was initially set to go into effect on Sunday, but has been pushed back to next July. So let me explain that in case that wasn't clear. So the HHS has to log whether or not they're putting rules into effect or whether or not these rules have been delayed. They quietly, without any sort of fanfare, without any sort of reporting, reported this into the logbook as they're supposed to. And some people caught wind of it. And they found out like, hey, wait a minute. Why did you delay this rule? That's a good question. Now, before I get into the why, let me show you what it would do. Now, the rule would have allowed the government to punish drug companies that knowingly and intentionally overcharge customers with fines of up to $5,000 for each instance of overcharging. Now, if you've been price gouging people on drugs for a while now, well, that $5,000 adds up very, very quickly. So, Now, in delaying the rule, the HHS said it wanted to give drug companies sufficient time to implement the necessary changes. So this is their reason why. HHS continues to believe that the delay of the effective date provides regulated entities sufficient time to implement the requirements of the rule, as well as allowing a more deliberate process of considering alternative and supplementary regulatory provisions, and to allow for sufficient time for additional rulemaking, according to a spokesman talking to Mike. Now, my question is, how hard is it to have your company stop price gouging on drugs? I think it would be actually very simple. You shouldn't need 4 different delays on implementing this rule. I mean, how many drugs are you price gouging people on? You should know this. Now, what this is, in my opinion, is the company saying, hold on, guys. Hold on. We still have millions to make on this. So if you could just delay the rule for another year, that'd be fantastic. And then when that arrives, when next July arrives, oh, can we delay it again? We're still not quite there. We're not ready. On and on and on. Now, this also might be a way to placate people, at least for a short time. Especially for people who support Trump, who believed in his promises. Saying that, oh no, guys, don't worry about it. There is a rule coming. But Trump's taken care of. He's going to take care of all of us. But we've also got to be fair to the businesses that will be impacted. What about the business? What about small business? It's going to be impacted. Well, what about the people who are being impacted? What about being fair to them? I mean, these people are sometimes paying hundreds more for the drugs that they need. And what about them? I would love to see people care as much about actual people as they do about the profits of giant multinational corporations. Look, this is an example, I think, of how much of an impact industry lobbying has on the government. Again, 4 times they've delayed this rule. 4 different times. All while these companies continue to make millions off price gouging. You know what would put a stop to this? Allowing the importation of cheaper drugs from Canada. Or allowing the government to negotiate cheaper drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies, giving them more power. Maybe you do some of these things, along with making some rules and vigorously enforcing them. Well, if you do that, maybe people will actually start being able to afford prescription drugs. And in my opinion, of course, that is just a start. I would actually prefer going to a single-payer system. But these things are actually easier to do in the meantime. And sometimes we could do with, or something we could do with the pressure, if we put enough pressure on Republicans and Democrats. Because again, remember Ted Cruz, right? Ted Cruz, Zodiac killer, supposedly, maybe. He actually supported importing cheaper drugs from Canada, when Cory Booker had not. That's very interesting. So that shows that on small provisions like that will actually lower the cost of prescription drugs, we could actually get stuff like that done. However, sadly, the administration and the current Congress apparently does not want to do that. But hopefully now that Tom Price is gone, maybe the next guy might be a little bit more sympathetic to that position. I don't necessarily have high hopes, but it would be nice to have things work out for a change. Okay. All right, we got more stories. So, a couple more here, and then we'll be out. All right. Let's go to healthcare. Now, Republicans in Congress have just recently missed a deadline to reauthorize a very important health program sponsored by the federal government. Now, it gets a lot of its funding from the federal government. Now, this is, of course, the Children's Health Insurance Program. It's also known as CHIP. Now, that relies, of course, on federal funding. Now, last week, Congress had the chance to reauthorize funding for this bill, and yet they decided, you know what, we're not going to. Now, they still have time, to be fair, because federal funding ends at the end of the month. So, hey, man, you guys got a month. Now, what does CHIP do? Well, basically what it does is that it allows low-income families to get help for their health insurance for their children. Now, it's kind of funny that neither the House nor the Senate decided to take up a vote to reauthorize the program. I thought these people were very incredibly pro-life and cared so much about the little children, the little babies. Apparently they do not. The Hill reported that Congress was on track to miss the deadline earlier this week, and though the Senate passed a bipartisan 5-year bill to reauthorize the program, a vote was not scheduled. So they had it, it was ready, and they're like, we're not going to schedule a vote. Really? Now, who in the Senate schedules the votes? Oh, that's Mitch McConnell. Now, you wouldn't actually want to have Mitch McConnell have to work. Now, do you? Even if it means children might not go without or might not go with health insurance. Now, to be fair, some states will not run out immediately, but others will get very close. At least 3 states in Washington, D.C. are expected to run out of money by December. And a majority of states will run out by March, according to a July report from the Medicaid and CHIP Payment and Access Commission. Now, another study by the Kaiser Family Foundation found that 10 states would actually run out of money by the end of the year. So at the earliest, December. Now, the question I have is, okay, well, now that we know that it's upcoming, are we going to do something about it? Are you going to take it up? Are you going to put it out for a vote? It should be a very, very easy vote, by the way. I mean, look, it's insurance for low-income children. Who wouldn't vote for it? It should be a slam dunk. It should be. This should be one of the easiest votes to do. Get it done. And then tell your constituents that, hey, man, you guys don't have to worry about your children losing their health insurance or their help that you can afford their health insurance with. Okay? Look, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into this. Maybe this is just like, oh, no, we'll take it up next week. But look, man, if you can't pass this immediately, what can you pass? Or what are you doing with your time? I mean, look, again, maybe they were just too busy trying to kick 23 million people off their health insurance with the Graham Cassidy bill. I don't know. But just get it done. Get it done. It's not that hard. It's not even controversial. In fact, it's actually super fucking popular. According to a recent poll conducted by the Kaiser Family Foundation, 40% of Americans say it's very, very important to reauthorize CHIP. 36% said it's extremely important. And an even smaller group of people said it was somewhat important. There were very, very few people that said, no, not important at all. So that's over 3/4 of the American people saying, yes, it's important. Let's reauthorize the program. Let's not have the little children go without health insurance. You know what's funny is that same poll looked at people who thought it was very important to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Turns out, making sure that low-income people have help affording insurance for their kids actually ranks as much more important than repealing Obamacare. Wow. Turns out people like it when the government does things to help, as opposed to taking things away. Who knew? Yet, of course, Republicans decided, no, we're going to go all in Graham Cassidy to try to repeal Obamacare. Like, this is a party, if it's not obvious enough, this is a party that doesn't give a shit about what the majority of American people want. They just don't care. And so incredibly obvious when you look at what they do. Not what they say, but what they actually do and what they do and don't vote for. If you think the GOP gives a shit about you or your kids, think again. Okay. One more, guys. Good old Republican math. Now, President Trump and the Republicans are still continuing to push for massive tax cuts for the rich while denying that they're giant tax cuts for the rich. It's a very interesting tactic. And that I do suppose works on some low information voters. But of course, even that is suspect, as I think anybody who looks at the numbers and sees how much the rich people will save will go, oh yeah, that's obviously a tax cut for the rich. But again, what it may work on some low information voters then, I'll say, but it doesn't work with people who actually have facts. Now, one of the people who has some facts happens to be Fox News host Chris Wallace, who on Sunday decided to challenge Mick Mulvaney, who was the White House budget director, about the claim that these tax cuts for the rich, which they claim are not tax cuts for the rich, will somehow pay for themselves through magic. He didn't say magic. I said magic because that's exactly what it is. Now, in this interview, you're going to see Wallace using statistics and studies and facts, and then you're going to see Mulvaney completely ignoring all of them. Watch.
The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center did this analysis. It shows the middle fifth of households in America, those earning between $48,000 and $86,000 a year, they'll get an average tax cut of $660 next year. Meanwhile, the top 1%, people making more than $730,000 a year, will get an average tax cut of almost $130,000 next year. Now, I understand that this isn't done yet, that they're only basing it on the plan as it exists at this point. But according to their analysis, that middle fifth gets 1.5% of the total benefit of the tax cut, while the top 1% gets 8.5% of the benefit. That doesn't seem fair.
Sure, a couple of different things, and I can't see the graph that you just put up, but I think that I have seen it previous to this, and what I think that particular organization did was, number one, they didn't do any dynamic scoring. If you go look at the details of what they put out, they assumed no benefit to the overall economy, which is just absurd to think that there won't be any
But I'm not talking, sir, I'm not talking about the economy. I'm talking about the benefit to the individual family, finish. The tax cut they get.
Okay, so look. On the what he said about, oh, you guys didn't, that's a flawed study, it's absurd. He didn't use dynamic scoring. Basically what he's saying is you didn't use our magical math, and that's why you came up with those numbers. Look, there's a reason that we don't, and no economist, no real economist uses dynamic scoring. You know why? It's because it doesn't work. They said the same kind of bullshit about the Trump tax cuts. Now, what happened? What happened? Well, it turns out they first of all, they had said that, oh, no. Like, if we cut taxes on everybody, especially the rich, then you're going to have amazing economic growth. Well, what happened during the Bush era? We actually had less overall economic growth than we had in the 1990s, when there was actually a higher tax rate on the rich. See, the math in the real world does not add up. But of course, Mulvaney's going to continue by pointing out, oh, no, but see, the families will do better because the economy overall, thanks to our magic math, is going to do better. Watch.
You can't look at the tax cut on a family until you realize how much better off they're going to be in a growing economy. But beyond that, They had to make assumptions because we didn't put any in the framework yet about where those particular tax rates kick in.
Okay, so again, we're talking about magic math here, and now he's like, oh, you guys are making assumptions, right? No. You realize that the whole idea of dynamic scoring is just based on an assumption that has been disproven. What we have is we have actual evidence that this dynamic scoring does not work and that tax cuts do not create economic growth on their own. It does not exist in a vacuum. Now, with that said, I'm going to get to one of the best parts. I'm going to get to the most obvious lie. Even if you believe that dynamic scoring, this magic math actually works, well, there's no way you can actually agree with what's next. Watch.
I mean, you can talk about, well, it's going to kick in at this level or that level, but if the middle income person is getting a $600 tax cut and the top 1% is getting a $130,000 tax cut, I mean, I thought the whole point was that the wealthy weren't going to get a tax cut at all.
It was, and I'm laughing because I was on one of your, I've done a couple of these interviews this week, Chris, and I was on one of your sister networks, and they were accusing the tax plan of not giving any tax cuts to the wealthy. In fact, they were accusing it of raising the taxes on the wealthy. And then I was on another network, and they were accusing the tax plan of giving all of the benefit to the wealthy. So it sounds like the beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Or, the beholder of all the tax cuts. But that's what he's saying. He's like, no, see, we were all, I was on this different network, and they were saying all these different things. So, of course, none of that's true, but my magic math is totally true. And not only that, but no, it's not a tax cut, even though they're going to pay a lot less. No. Well, look, if the rich people are going to pay less, then yes, it's a tax cut. You can't say that it's not a tax cut. In fact, you've got two studies out there. Yeah, you might call them absurd, but they're actually based on facts, and they actually confirm this, right? Now, of course, what they do claim is, no, we're not actually cutting taxes. What we're doing is we're cutting the rates and closing the loopholes. Oh, so wait, but has that actually ever happened? No, of course not. They always say they're going to close the loopholes before they pass the tax cut. Then they convince us, okay, well, we'll let you pass the tax cut. They pass it. And guess what? The loopholes are still there. Weird how that works. Now, one more here, and that's a question. The question of how we pay for these tax cuts, because again, it's very rare for people to ask for that question, and whether or not the tax cuts will end up paying for themselves. Let's take a look.
But the fact is, there is no evidence that tax cuts pay for themselves. The Reagan tax cut back in 1981 added $208 billion to the deficit over 4 years. The Bush tax cuts in 2001 and 2003 added $1.5 trillion to the debt over 10 years. Mr. Mulvaney, you can argue whether or not tax cuts spur economic growth. I think that's a perfectly legitimate argument. There is no evidence that they pay for themselves.
So that's what they're claiming, right? They're claiming that these tax cuts, they will pay for themselves. But as you just saw, Chris Wallace just dropped some knowledge on his head and said, no, but look, you can make an argument, and it wouldn't be a good argument, I would say, but you can make an argument that I guess some tax cuts do lead to growth. Again, not the best argument in my opinion, but maybe there are in some cases that maybe they do. But you can't make the argument that tax cuts pay for themselves. They don't, and we have empirical evidence. We have proof of that because we've already did it. But they're just like, no, if we just give them another tax cut for the rich, that'll be the one. No, we got to stop doing this, right? Look, this is all bullshit math. These tax cuts, again, like the Bush tax cuts, will blow a hole in the deficit for absolutely no benefit. Now, look, I don't think deficit spending is necessarily a bad thing. It actually depends on how it's used, right? I'm not what they call a deficit hawk. Yes, I do actually care about it somewhat. And I don't want us to have to run debts and deficits because I think in the long term, that could be a bad thing. But if you actually spend, like, I'm okay with that deficit spending if you actually use it to help the country. For example, using it to fund public infrastructure projects. Now, those things, they create jobs and economic activity. And I also believe that you should spend money on healthcare and education. Now, these things have actual, real, tangible benefits for the country. For example, you've got a smarter, healthier workforce with good infrastructure. That's wonderful. You're going to create more businesses, right? Now, tax cuts for the rich, however, well, that doesn't add any benefits. So why are we doing deficit spending on that? It's not like the rich reinvest in the economy when they get a tax cut. They don't. They end up not creating more jobs. Oftentimes, they even end up cutting jobs in order to give more executive bonuses. What Mulvaney is pushing is absolute garbage that is basically for the benefit of his biggest donors. Now, I got to give some credit to Chris Wallace for pushing back on some of that, garbage on Fox News, no less. We need to do what he's doing and continue to hold these politicians' feet to the fire, especially Democrats who actually might otherwise vote for these ridiculous tax cuts. Because trust me, some of them would. And so we've got to, again, continue to hold these politicians accountable, hold their feet to the fire, make sure that they don't pass these ridiculous tax cuts that will end up hurting us in the end. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you haven't already, help us out. Sign up as a Patreon. Patreon.com/TYTNation. You can help us out there. Make sure to like and share this stream. Like and share our videos. They'll be going up on the channel later today. And other than that, love you guys. Thank you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.